President Obama has been the source of countless conspiracy theories. I mean, one right after another. Ever since he stepped into the Oval Office, whether it was his alleged friendship with Reverend Wright, or those death panels that Sarah Palin warned us all about, or the FEMA concentration camps for Republicans, or birth certificate issues. The list is endless. But, it used to be only crazy people, only really nut jobs talked about those things. But now it's moved both into mainstream media, and you have people that that somehow have convinced us that they're leaders talking about this very thing. Mark Potok is senior fellow at the Southern Poverty Law Center and the editor-in-chief of the Intelligence Report. Mark, this is like a cancer. It's just progressing and progressing.
It really is like a cancer. It's like our whole, the whole political health of the society has become, poisoned by this infection. To me, the most dramatic recent, nutty conspiracy theory that has big time entered the mainstream is the idea that a UN program that was signed, a UN resolution that was signed by the first President Bush way back in 1992, along with the leaders of 177 other countries, to go forward with a completely voluntary global sustainability program called Agenda 21, has now become a gigantic conspiracy in the eyes and ears of the radical right.
Okay, tell us what the tinfoil hat kooks. I mean, the people that sitting in their armchair and watching Douchey in the morning and Hannity at night. I mean, what are they saying? What's all the stuff that's out there now? I mean,
with respect to Agenda 21, what they're saying is that this plan, which contains absolutely no requirements for anybody to do anything, it's not a legal treaty, it has no legal force, it's not an agreement even to do anything. This is actually a plan to impose socialism on the United States, to take away all our weapons, and on and on and on and on. The fact that this idea is being promoted primarily by the John Birch Society is no surprise at all. The John Birch Society, of course, being the kind of nutty anti-communist group that accused President Eisenhower of being a quote-unquote communist agent.
We knew about them, but...
Right,
then you have
and fluoridation and so on.
Yeah, you have Sarah Palin, and you've got Michelle Bachmann, and you've got what are supposed to be legitimate leadership talking about crazy ideas like birth certificates and concentration camps for right-wingers, and how Obama's trying to build an army with the UN to come over here and take our guns away.
Well, sure. I mean, here's the bottom line on the Agenda 21 business. It starts with the John Birch Society, but earlier this year, it was actually adopted wholesale by the Republican National Committee in a resolution, which says that Agenda 21 is a comprehensive plan for global political control. It's a destructive and insidious scheme. It's going to do away, it's going to impose socialist/communist redistribution of the wealth, quote unquote. So, it's not merely that we've got a few nuts in the old John Birch Society running around saying these things. It's that the Republican National Committee has adopted this as a plank and is urging Mitt Romney, the presumptive nominee, to make it an explicit platform of his presidential campaign. So, yes, what you're talking about is, what I pointed out in a kind of recent editorial I wrote was that, for instance, the birther stuff, which, we thought was roundly debunked when the president released his quote-unquote long-form birth certificate, that idea is now being pushed heavily, not only by nuts on the right, but Joe Arpaio, the sheriff of Maricopa County in Arizona, which is a county of 4 million people. It's bigger than something like 16 states in this country.
Well, I mean, you see the teabaggers. I mean, with me, every time I see a teabagger legislator, a teabagger organizer, with 10 people together, they're talking about issues like this. I mean, look, you've got, for example, gay men responsible for the Nazi Holocaust. Okay, right. That was out there and it wasn't just it just wasn't in Crazyville. It was on mainstream media Crazyville.
That's absolutely true. That's the American Family Association, a $20 million a year so-called Christian organization that makes that claim, among many others. So, again and again in all these different spheres, we see people who once upon a time would have been considered a part of the sort of legitimate mainstream, saying things that are patently false.
David Yerushalami, this is a guy, he's a complete Islamophobe, that he heads a lot of this stuff up. He's able to place some of this crazy talk about, we need to prevent Sharia, the use of Sharia law. We can't let him build another mosque. But what ends up happening is nobody goes back and looks at who the nut is that's originating the story. The media is so damn lazy.
Yeah, I mean,
it shows up on their desk and they say, well, this must be credible. Well, David, this guy's not credible.
Well, I mean, that in a sense is what we're talking about, right? I mean, in part, what this is all about is the collapse of the traditional media doing its traditional job. And, so now certainly you can find out that Yerushalmi and the whole idea of, Sharia law being imposed on Americans is ludicrous. The Constitution absolutely makes that impossible, simply out of the question. But, you've got to go to Right Wing Watch or the Southern Poverty Law Center or People for Separation of Church and State, all that kind of thing for the American way.
To trace the money.
Or you've got to have, essentially activist organizations that are doing, as you said, the checks that normal media people once upon a time did. So, we live in a world, in this country anyway, we live in a country in which, alternative realities are allowed to coexist side by side, and much of the media seems awfully frightened to come right out and say, look, the Sharia law thing, for instance, is a joke.
Or Fox picking up on the idea that there's this plot to merge Mexico with the United States in Canada.
That's right, the North American Union, completely fictitious idea.
It used to be we would see that in, the Globe magazine that, you bought when you bought chewing gum at a
That's right, alongside a story saying the four horsemen of the apocalypse were spotted in the sky, of New Mexico.
But now it's
mainstream
media.
So you didn't have to take it seriously then.
Yeah. Now it's mainstream.
Now it actually informs political debate in this country, and I think what's happened with the attack on Hillary Clinton's deputy as a supposed agent of the Muslim Brotherhood. I mean, we've gone beyond nuttiness and into pure McCarthyism.
Well, and it's all about selling. I mean, I think about. God, I keep coming back to the CNN, the demise of CNN. I mean, I don't really think in the next 10 years that they'll recover. I mean, they're firing everybody, but the backstory on there was that they were trying to find kind of a Fox light position that they could take, that they could have Wolf Blitzer be more Fox-like. They could have Nancy Grace even crazier than she is, and when you have that kind of setting. What it does is it launches stories like this because they're so anxious to get somebody to watch their friggin' television station.
That's right, and obviously we see whole media empires set up on that basis, like Fox, right? Like much of talk radio, like Clear Channel and so on. I'm not sure how CNN thinks that they're going to save themselves. I mean, they seem to be. Putting on, I see one or two people, Anderson Cooper on there, who are really decent journalists.
That you might listen
trying to do a decent job, but it seems thinner and thinner with every passing week. And, apparently the selling of yet more craziness by CNN isn't being very successful. I mean, they seem to be in some real trouble.
Mark, as you have pointed out so many times in so many things you've written, the problem is what it does is the craziness breeds really dangerous environments, like where you have Arizona. I mean, it's like crazy central. But what they've done now is they have people, the sheriff saying that we're not going to allow the federal law enforcement agents to arrest anybody without the sheriff giving you permission, or them building this enforcement group that's supposed to an armed patrol. Volunteers who are immunized from getting in trouble for shooting somebody that's now up and down the border. I mean, that's where the craziness leads. It leads into hysteria.
That's right. Look, in the forthcoming, it's not out yet, but in the next issue of the magazine I edit here, the Intelligence Report, we have a big cover story essentially looking at the question of are people being murdered? Are immigrants being murdered by American-born nativist vigilantes in Arizona? And, we don't come to the evidence is mixed. There's some very strong suspicion, certainly not only on our part, but on the part of law enforcement, in particular federal law enforcement, that may be going on. And, what is that? Where does that really come from? Well, it doesn't help when the governor of Arizona, Jan Brewer, falsely tells Arizonans and the rest of the nation that the state is being littered with quote-unquote headless bodies. In other words, Brewer is trying to play off the fears that are generated by people seeing what's happening with the cartels in Mexico, where they really do decapitate people. But, as it turned out, it was a fictional story, a fairy tale told by Brewer. But you can bet it had the right-wing stations and very large segments of the population, jumping up and down, right? They're cutting people's heads off, our kids.
Yeah. Mark Potok, Southern Poverty Law Center, always delivering the story. Thank you for joining me.